Now that Representative Patton's here, we can start. All right, committee, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We wanted to talk welcome a couple of people to committee. Brian Burkamp is here, Cindy Neighbor is here, and Gabriel and William are replacing Dennis for the day. So welcome to Commerce Committee. Also, I have two very special constituents here that are interested in government, and that is Micah and Zoe Beck. Stand up and say hi, everybody. There you go. Yeah, so, they had the day off of school, and they thought they'd come up and see their capital. They've never been here before, so. All right. Can I see the agenda? Cindy, in the agenda. Sorry. First item on the agenda is a hearing on HB 2387. It's an update to the Star Bond bill. We'll get a briefing on the changes to the Star Bond bill from Charles Raymer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. HB 2387 changes Star Bond law with respect to probably a big part of this bill is replacing lost sales tax revenue. And the first part of the bill is a new section that does that because of the changes in the sales tax rate. That revenue stream is going away for some of the Star Bond districts. So this bill sets up a procedure for replacing that. This bill also adds a couple of new Star Bond projects, I guess. It amends the definition for historic theaters to allow for costs for construction, and also it adds a major amusement park to the list of potential Star Bond projects. And finally, the bill extends the deadline for the report on Star Bonds that the Secretary of Commerce must make to the Legislature. So starting on page 5 of the bill, you'll see there changes to the cost, that those changes are an amendment to the definition of project costs for Star Bonds. And you'll see that historic theater is added there, and it includes costs incurred in connection with the construction or renovation of a historic theater and for any personal property. And then we also have costs included for a major amusement park. Those include costs incurred in connection with the construction or purchase of amusement rides as defined in the amusement ride statute there, 44-1601. The definition of Star Bond project on page 6 is changed to include a major amusement park as defined in subsection HH. If you turn the page to page 8, you'll see that HH definition there on lines 11 to 16. It includes a facility containing rides and attractions, may include restaurants, retail establishments, hotels, motels. And the Secretary has to make a finding that capital improvements of not less than $100 million will be built in the state to construct the major amusement park. And then, of course, major amusement park area means an area containing a major amusement park. The change, so let me go back to section 1 a little bit and talk about the replacement of the lost sales tax revenue. So the way new section 1 sets this up is that starting March 15, there's a certification by the Secretary of Revenue of the amount of revenue that would have been generated by the missing sales tax for each Star Bond district that was established prior to December 31, 2022. And then that certification goes to Director of Accounts and reports, and then the Director of Accounts reports to certified state treasurer the amount starting on March 25, 2024. That's in subsection B. And then commencing on April 1st, 2024, and then on the first day of each month thereafter, the state treasurer transfers monies to the respective city bond finance funds for those star bond districts to make up for that revenue. So it's replaced on a monthly basis starting April 1st, 2024. The reason that date is selected is because the budget bill provided for replacement of these revenues sort of up to that time frame. So this is this section kind of takes up where the budget bill leaves off, or at least that's the intent of it. There's also a change on page to the tax increment, to the definition of tax increment that is in line with that change. So with respect to I mentioned the change in the report date. You can see that on page 12. Instead of the secretary reporting on the star bond districts January of each session, they need to report by March 31st of each session. And that basically is what the bill does. I stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for the reviser? Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a misconception on my part, but I always thought that the star bonds was a tax increment. Am I mistaken on that, or are we diverting all of the state funds to liquidate the bonds?
Yes, I'm not sure I understand your question. The bill doesn't really change anything except, with respect to the sales tax portion, just to make that tax increment definition sort of in line with what we're doing, the changes in the sales tax rate. But I think I'm missing your question.
Well, let me try to rephrase that then and start just with the basic. Is the star bond project itself a tax increment financing?
Yes.
And does that increment vary from project to project?
I think I can help you out, Charles, on that. I think I can help you out on that. Representative, when you draw the star bond district, all sales tax that is state or local is used to pay the star bonds off until they're paid for. There can be a TIF added to it, but that would go back to the developer. So the TIFs don't come into play, but all sales tax collected on the state level are pledged to pay the bonds off in the future.
So the 6.5% is all pledged to bond liquidation.
Right. It's all pledged to bond liquidation, and the food sales tax that we would be removing, this bill would allow the state to fund that portion.
Okay. Well, that's a misconception on my part because I thought it was strictly an increment above and beyond the sales tax portion. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I apologize, Representative. So, what I was thinking about is an increment with respect to the base year that's determined initially.
Representative Burkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 1940 date for theaters, is that consistent with other statute, or is that just applied to this bill only?
So typically, star bond project costs do not include personal property or vertical construction. So that would be an exception, an addition, specifically with respect to historic theaters.
Thank you.
Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, do we know, are there currently, if you're aware, are there currently any $100 million amusement parks in the state of Kansas?
I'm not sure, but I don't believe so.
Okay, so if there were, though, is this retroactive? Is it something that one that is currently available could use star bonds for additional, or is this simply for a hypothetical new amusement park that might come in?
So I would probably defer to the conferees on that. My guess would be that they do have an amusement park in mind.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further questions for the revisor before we move on? Seeing no further questions, Charles, thanks for your time. We'll move on to the proponent in-person section, and we'll start with Bob North. I bet he could answer some of those questions for us. Kansas Department of Commerce. Thanks, Bob, for being here.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to address House Bill 2387 today. For those of you that aren't familiar with star bonds, it's a financing tool to allow local units of government to build attractions and tourism components with a goal to bringing new people into Kansas, new sales tax dollars into the state, and to help grow the state's economy in that way. And it's been a pretty successful program right at about 20 years. It has seen continuous improvement through legislative enactment as the states had experience with projects, and as post audits, done a number of audits, and the bill, the act gets amended frequently, with a goal towards making it an improved product. And the proposed amendments, in our view, would continue that overall improvement. Kind of the three main components. One is to replace that lost sales tax attributable to food and food ingredients, and that's important for a couple of reasons. We've got bondholders who purchased star bonds in the past, and they purchased those bonds with an understanding that sales tax on food and food ingredients was going to be part of their collateral, if you will, or part of the revenue stream to service those bonds. So in reducing the sales tax rate, whether it be from 6.5 to 4.5 and then to 0, what have you, so we have reduced the dollars that are available to service that debt. So the intention here with that replacement of lost food sales tax revenue is to keep those bondholders harmless, so that the fact that sales tax has been reduced doesn't affect the ability of the issuer to finance those bonds. And so the other kind of policy consideration is that the sooner those bonds get paid off, the sooner the state is going to receive 100% of the sales tax from that district and from those attractions. So if you can look at it as if, in a sense, you're getting a better rate, you're refinancing your house, you're getting your debt paid off sooner to free up those dollars quicker down the road. The addition of historic theaters and amusement rides. Historic theaters have been they've been an eligible area under the Star Bond Act since its inception. However, there was the restrictions on vertical construction that exist in the Star Bond Act in most instances precluded any historic theaters from being able to use that to its advantage. Because typical star bond costs are infrastructure, so they're sewer and gas and electricity and parking and sidewalks and things like that. And only in a couple of instances can star bonds be used for vertical construction. Those exceptions right now are major multi-sport athletic facilities and museums. So in an effort to actually be in a position to help historic theaters, this language is in there so that historic theater could actually, put in new seating or, do some vertical renovations necessary to make a difference with the historic theater. That's the purpose of that. The amusement rides, again, would put amusement rides on a level with historic theater, would allow for some vertical construction and also to pay the cost of the rides themselves, which would greatly assist the development of major amusement parks in the state of Kansas. And then lastly, the kind of technical cleanup on the deadline for the annual report. So the annual report catches sales tax that has been generated during 4 quarters. And the fourth quarter information is not typically available until really the latter part of January. So having a report date of February 1st really prohibits our ability to give you the best and most current information. So pushing that reporting date out to March 31st means that we will be able to give you complete fourth quarter financial information on these projects. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee, any questions for Bob North, Representative Carpenter?
Sometimes, yeah. So just to be clear, the state general fund is going to make up the difference of the 6.5% sales tax off of food that we're taking up. Is that the gist of this bill?
Yes.
Thank you.
Bob, on that same subject, what's taken into account? So let's say you have I understand that there was the bondholders were relying on that revenue. What about if the bonds were sold before a grocery store went in and they weren't relying on food tax at that point?
Yeah, I think there's 5 or 6, and we can get you a definitive list, 5 or 6 projects that would be impacted both by the reduction in sales tax and by the language in this bill. So you're correct. Not every district is going to be uniformly impacted by the reduction in food and food ingredient tax or by this bill. I mean, every district probably has a convenience store, but the dollars for food and food ingredients coming out of those retailers is probably minimal. So you're looking at districts with grocery stores, and I think there's 5 or 6 districts that have grocery stores.
And so if next week, say, or next year, there's a grocery store built in a current Star Bond district that was approved before December 31st, 2022, are we going to have to make up that food sales tax as well?
No, I wouldn't think so. So any project that comes online after the legislature began to reduce the sales tax on food and food ingredients, those bondholders knew what was going to be in their revenue stream when those bonds were purchased. So this would be for districts that were established or that bonds were sold prior to the beginning of that tax reduction.
The way I understood the proviso that was put in the appropriation bill last year was that these dollars would be put into an account to later be paid into the Star Bond districts. Is that how you understood that proviso, or did they get paid directly to the districts right away? Well,
Generally, yes, that's accurate. So I think the way the proviso works is that the city with the Star Bond district would certify to the Department of Revenue that the amount of sales tax that it lost due to the reduction in sales tax on food and food ingredients. That would then trigger a transfer to the state treasurer's office, who would then transfer those funds into the respective bond accounts.
And then my final kind of question on this particular subject is, being that most of our star bonds, if not all of them, are on target or have already paid for themselves, they're on target to be paid off early. Why would we use today's dollars to pay down those star bonds even quicker? Why wouldn't we just have the report of the dollars that might have been missed? And if the star bonds don't pay for themselves eventually, then we could reimburse the star bond holders at that time. Wouldn't that be a better way to look at this? Because at the end of the day, we're never going to have to reimburse them because they all pay off early.
Right. So I mean, it's a great question, and we should kind of think through it. A couple things come to mind. So let's assume a 5% interest rate on those bonds that are outstanding. So to the extent we can pay down those bonds sooner, get the bonds completely paid off, then all those sales tax dollars are going to come back to the benefit of the state. And as an example of that, we could look at Village West, which, those bonds paid off relatively early, a little bit early. State's getting somewhere around $45 to $48 million of sales tax from that project. So the sooner we can pay off star bonds, the sooner the state's going to see the money. And it's a little bit of a math calculation at that point. If we're paying 5% interest on bonds and our state revenues that we've got, if we were to establish a fund and put dollars today into that fund to be used at a later date, is that going to generate more than a 5% return? And I'm not probably qualified to speak to that, but that would be probably the main financial consideration. And then there's the impact. It's a little softer, but what would bondholders, both current bondholders and future bondholders, how would that modify, their behavior when another opportunity to buy state of Kansas? Star bonds are not state debt, but they are funded through state sales tax. So that'd be another issue to think about.
All right, thanks, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing that information today. How many star bond projects do we currently have that would be affected by this?
Yeah, I think they would all virtually all would be affected to some degree. But there's only, I think there's 5 or 6 districts with grocery stores. And so those would be impacted significantly. Last year, we looked at what the total cost of those or revenues associated with that sales tax, and we'll get you the exact number, but it was between $10.5 and $11 million a year.
All right. So if I'm clear on this, then any new star bond project coming in, since the tax has been put in place, they will not be affected by this. Because they've been able to plan out not using that 6.5%. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying right now is this could have an effect of $10 or $11 million on overall, possibly.
I would like to reserve the opportunity to get you a better amount. But last year, when we had this same kind of policy discussion, that's what the number was.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you create, say, like a CID, you usually have like a 1% tax that stacks on top of the state level and the county level taxes. Forgive me for my ignorance. Star bonds don't stack. They don't have a separate district level tax. They're taking it straight from the sales tax of the state.
Yes, correct. And if the local unit of government passes a CID, so state's 6.5%, and then the local unit passes a 2% CID, that does not affect the state's tax. That is specific to that local unit of government and to the parameters of that CID district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Representative Carpenter, did you have more?
I did. Representative Neighbors asked kind of it. What's the fiscal note? You'll get the fiscal note to us, but you're thinking it's around 10 or $11 million in this.
Yes. Mhm.
Representative Dotson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would have, I think the chair's second to the last question, I would have read slightly differently in that when you plan a Star Bonds project, you plan not only on using the state portion of tax to pay off the bonds, but there's also assumption of growth. In other words, when you send the project up, the reason that it's a good project is because there's some return on investment. Part of that return on investment may be the growth in current businesses in that Star Bond area, and also a presumption about businesses that could be attracted to join that area. So I know there's a little bit of pay me now, pay me later here, but it seems to me any business added, to include grocery stores, you would want to give them the same benefit regardless of when they came online, whether you thought of it before, whether you thought of it after. When I say pay me now or pay me later, I just mean that we would ask the state to reimburse the grocery tax at the same time we're getting ready to send money back to the state when the Star Bond's paid. So it's a little bit more complicated.
Have you thought about the base? Let's say you drew the district around a Walmart, which happens quite frequently, I think. But you take the base sales tax that was being collected on food. Did you separate the food out from the total sales tax that was when you create the base level? Because once you establish a base level, anything collected above that base level goes to pay for the Star Bonds. Were you able to separate out the food sales versus the retail sales and say a Walmart or a Target?
Yes, definitely to that last point. Yes, food and food ingredients are coded separately as sales tax is collected. And to your question about the base, you're correct in that only incremental growth of sales tax is used to go into a project, as well as new sales tax. So if you've got an existing retailer and it's generating $1,000 of sales tax, that money doesn't go into the project. That money comes back to the state, and then starting at $1,001, that sales tax goes to the project. That there is language in House Bill 2387 that reflects this food and food ingredient modification, so that when base year revenues are determined by the Department of Revenue, that loss of food and food ingredient sales tax is taken into account.
Are there any further questions before we move on from the sales tax? No, not really seeing any. If they pop up, let me know. Bob's still up there. I'm looking at the amusement ride section of the bill, and I think it's page 8. The definition of major amusement park includes restaurants and retail establishments and hotels and motels. Is your intent for the Star Bonds to pay for vertical construction of restaurants and hotels, as well as amusement parks, or just the rides?
Yeah. So our understanding and primary interest would be in the rides themselves. And you've got a conferee, I believe, following me that can give you more detail. But in order to successfully operate an amusement park in Kansas, you've got to be able to operate pretty much 12 months a year. And so if you can kind of picture some other amusement parks where maybe you wait in line inside a building which is either warmed if it's cold out or cooled if it's hot out. You get on the ride, and then the ride takes you outside the building, does whatever gyrations the ride does, comes back, and you depart the ride. So, in the context of buildings associated with amusement parks, that's kind of where the department was on that.
So your intent wasn't to pay for hotels, motels, restaurants, and retail establishments in the Starbond district.
Yeah, our experience has been that a successful attraction will bring that type of development.
Okay, Charles, can you answer that question? Is that how the bill is written currently? Would they be able to use Starbond dollars to build the hotel?
So, I defer to Mr. North, of course, on this. But, if you look at the definition of a major amusement park, it means a facility. And as you pointed out, Chairman, that includes the restaurants, retail establishments, hotels, and motels. And the portion where we're amending the project costs refers to that project costs include amusement park, including costs incurred in connection with the construction or purchase of amusement rides. So I guess the question would be, that language referencing other facilities, hotels, that's been used before in some other project definitions. And I'm trying to recall whether, in those instances, whether project costs include construction. I don't think so, but it's possible that they do because there is that language there. So maybe Mr. North could clarify that because that language has been used before.
All right, we can talk about that before we work the bill on the restaurants and hotels being included or not. My last question, I think, is about the rural areas of Kansas. It seems that these major attractions are built in larger cities, and we also now have the Apex bill that's benefiting Johnson County and Sedgwick County, and those projects will bring a lot of people and a lot of money and a lot of growth to the area, but we're not really doing much for rural areas. Can you tell me what we have in store or what we maybe could put into a Starbond type deal to make these workable for rural areas?
Yes, and that's again a really, really good question, and we've made efforts. The Starbond Act has been amended a couple of times with a view towards making it more accessible to smaller communities, and we've you have taken the for a project in a metropolitan statistical area, it's got to be $100 million in CapEx and $100 million in sales at project build out. So we've taken away those constraints for rural projects. We've on the main street of a rural community, you can do what we call pay-as-you-go financing, which means you don't have to issue bonds, which is a more efficient, effective way of financing projects. And we are currently working with two rural communities on projects, and the projects are active, meaning that we have hopes that they will come to fruition. But it's a great point, and we need to do as much as we can. So this tool that's been so successful is used more broadly across the state.
All right, Committee Representative Dodson.
Just one quick question, Mr. Chair. When you were talking about the 12-month requirement, for access and so on, I guess I was unaware of that, and I'm trying to visualize the kind of amusement park that would be over $100 million would be largely contained indoors. The only one that I remember is Wolf Creek, and that's certainly not $100 million. So, particularly if we try to do that in the rural area, it'd be next to impossible. So, maybe we need to change a definition or two here in order to enable rural areas.
I think the department would be open to suggested changes to help the rural areas in any way they can. So we'll talk about that.
Thank you.
Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And apologies that I'm late, so this may have already been discussed, but we were talking about the amusement park addition. Prior to that, we've had the Schlitterbaum, which was a water park. Is that on the list previously, or did we just categorize that with something else?
I'm not following that question.
So I'm looking at the additions to the Star Bonds program, and we have historic theaters added on page 5 and major amusement park. But previously we've had the Schlitterbaum water park. Is that on a list and I'm missing it? Because it was previously, I believe, a Star Bond district.
It was, and so I think your question pertains to use of Star Bonds, perhaps to build rides, and at Schlitterbaum, and at that time, Star Bonds could not be used for purposes like that. So at Schlitterbaum, no Star Bonds were used for the rides themselves. It was kind of land acquisition and typical infrastructure.
Okay, and so originally Star Bonds was created for that purpose, correct? For the infrastructure around in a developing area so that they would have the access they needed, the drainage, the properties. That was the original intent of Star Bonds, correct?
Yes, I there's about 20 specific eligible cost items in statute, and 17 of those are infrastructure related, and we've added major multi-sport athletic facilities, museums, and now we're talking about historic theaters and amusement rides.
And something that would be like a ride is going to be a capital investment that is going to need updated all the time. It's not going to have the longevity of, let's say, a sports complex that's going to have a lifespan of more than 30 years. Correct? It's something that's going to be like a car. It's going to depreciate a lot quicker.
Yeah, I don't have much experience with that aspect of amusement rides, but kind of intuitively, I think that sounds very likely.
Okay, and then just my final question, Mr. Chairman. So what else can we add to this list? What else are we looking to in a year or 2 or 3? Anything you can think of?
I can't, but that doesn't mean that there's not a developer somewhere that's thinking of something new and some new way to bring more people and more sales tax to the state.
The developers are very creative that way. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So some of the conversations that we've been having about economic development incentives in rural areas, it's been such a long time since we've talked about that. Can you remind me of the incentives that we already offer rural areas? Just refresh me, if you would.
Just in general? Or talking about Star Bonds?
So we have Star Bonds and Apex in areas that have benefited the places in Kansas where you have higher populations. But I think if we walk it back historically, I think that we do have some incentives that are meant to help our rural areas. So if you could refresh the committee on that, that would be helpful.
Most of our programs are available to rural areas. We've also got the Rural Opportunity Zone program, which is intended to bring people back to rural parts of the state. And we've got the Rural Housing Incentive District program, which is targeted at more housing in rural parts of the state. Every time we have a project in rural Kansas, housing is an issue. There's lots of communities that haven't had a new house built in 60 or 70 years. So it's hard to recruit talent to a community that doesn't have adequate housing. And so that program has been very, very successful. I think we've done 80 some rural housing incentive districts. So we do have tools to target it at rural communities, but we've always got to strive to do more. So we're aware of that.
Any further questions? Representative Christy Williams.
I'm so sorry. Just one quick question on the sales tax, because that's how we're going to hopefully pay for these districts. Can you remind me on, I think there's sales tax on theater tickets. What about amusement parks? Is there sales tax on all of these additional things that are added? If I go to a museum and I have entrance fee, is there sales tax on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. So no more questions for you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next in person is Kimberly Swati, representing the city of Derby. Welcome to Commerce Committee.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Gincher-Swati, and I just have to tell you this is a complete and total departure from basically 20 years of being in this building. And at 1:30, Monday through Thursday, you can find me up in Senate Utilities. So this is a milestone for me to be in-house commerce. I appreciate the opportunity. And I do represent the city of Derby, and we are here testifying in support of House Bill 2387. And obviously, Mr. North knows all of the ins and outs of star bonds, and I apologize that our city manager, Kyle Mangus, is unable to be here today. He certainly has been very involved in crafting the city of Derby's star bonds. But our support comes from passage of the reduction in the food sales tax last year. And it was just a bit of an unintended consequence associated with that reduction. And it obviously does have an impact on our ability to pay back our star bonds in a more expedited manner. So briefly, the city of Derby, we have a very successful star bond district. And in that star bond district, it was always predicated upon a Dillon's Marketplace, a Target, and an Aldi's being there. One of the star bonds district that Derby has, it's been very financially successful, and it was able to pay off its star bonds in 2017, 15 years ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. And we would just note that the particular star bonds district where the Aldi's and the Dillon's Marketplace and the Target are, the bond life would be extended. And as Mr. North reported, that it is a little bit of, whether or not we are moving money around, so to speak, but we ultimately think that it would be better for our bondholders to have that certainty for essentially what the revenue fund that they signed up for is, that, and that would in fact be coming back to them, that then would allow us to pay back that star bond in a hopefully more timely manner, and then retire that, and then the state, of course, then would receive all of that sales tax. So we just stand in support of 2387, solely the portion related to the food sales tax revenue replacement fund. We are not testifying on the balance of the bill. Happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Not seeing any. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Hutfels. Welcome to the committee, Mike.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My name is Mike Hutfles with Hutfles & Associates Government Relations, and I'm here today in support of House Bill 2387 and would ask for your consideration to amend the definition slightly of the amusement park piece. I think to answer maybe some of the questions that have been asked, there is a major international company that has expressed an interest in coming to Kansas and utilizing the Star Bond tax incentive that is currently in place. These changes are being asked for to make that happen. As we know, and as we look out the window today, Kansas isn't a great place for a year-round amusement park. The plan for this particular group would be to build a facility, basically an enclosed facility with a variety of amusement rides and restaurants and the normal things you'd see, say, at a Disneyland, just self-contained within a building. Current Star Bond statute doesn't allow for that, and these changes would allow it to happen. So I have included the amendment in the testimony. Would be happy to work to the advisors at the appropriate time as you prepare to work the bill on this particular piece, and try to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, so your intent actually is to pay for a hotel, restaurant, and other building type things in.
I'm not sure about the complete. I think with them being self-contained within the building, I believe you have to account for the outside structure and various pieces and parts that may be actually being paid for. There are attorneys. I know Mr. North has worked with a few of them, but Gary Anderson being one, who have worked specifically with this project and would probably have more answers, which I would definitely get for you prior to the bill being worked.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Goodyear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is John Goodyear, and I'm the General Counsel for the League of Kansas Municipalities. And committee, I can keep my testimony brief. Our testimony is limited to that Section 1 part of the bill as well, although the League does support the Star Bond Act in general. But one of the things that came up as we were prepping for this session, we do policy committee meetings with our member cities. They're able to bring suggestions for policies, and we had multiple cities approach us about replacing that sales tax that was lost by the phase out and eventual elimination of the food sales tax. This is something that they're concerned about, being able to pay off these bonds in a timely, early manner. The sooner we pay them off, the cheaper it is ultimately, and the better it is for our communities, better it is for our state. So, Mr. Chairman, like I said, I can be brief on that. The League is supportive of this bill, specifically Section 1, and I can stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Seeing no questions for you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. Not showing any more in-person proponents. We have a written proponent that's in the S drive, and we also have a written opponent in the S drive from Michael Austin. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing on HB 2387, and we'll open the hearing on HB 2388 and get an update from the reviser, overview from the reviser.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2388 makes some changes to the law pertaining to occupational licensing. It essentially requires that licensing bodies provide verified electronic credentials in addition to paper-based credentials to all credential holders, including military service members and others receiving credentials that have, based on another jurisdiction, who are coming into Kansas. So if you turn in the bill to page 2, you'll see at the bottom of page 2 in subsection B, lines 33 to the end, there's a requirement that any licensing body is to issue a paper-based and verified electronic license with respect to folks who are coming in from outside the state. And then on page 4, there's an additional provision that licensing bodies are to provide both paper-based and verified electronic credentials to all persons regulated by the licensing body. That's at the bottom of page 6. There's some additional provisions with respect to the licensing bodies, how they're supposed to handle those electronic credentials. That's on the top of page 7. licensing bodies have to utilize a central electronic record system. They are tasked with maintaining oversight of electronic credentials. There's a requirement that the system that they use has to provide instantaneous verification, and a system that's capable of instantly verifying the authenticity and validity of the electronic credentials. That's again on the top of page 7. And furthermore, the electronic credential systems that licensing bodies are to have must maintain an auditable record of credentials issued by each licensing body. Directing your attention to the first part of the bill, the relevant definitions, you can find those on page 2. Page 2, line 11, electronic credential is defined there. And in addition, a verification system is defined on line 31. So that's what the bill does. Stand for questions.
Committee, any questions to the advisor? Seeing none. Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it. Open the proponent section. We'll start with Colton Gibson.
Good afternoon, Chairman Tarwater, members of the committee. My name is Colton Gibson, and I'm here today on behalf of ASPIRE, which is the Alliance for States Providing Interoperable Reciprocity. Thank you for allowing us to provide testimony today in support of House Bill 2388, which would amend House Bill 2066, passed in 2021, which was the Occupational Licensure Reform Bill. House Bill 2388 would effectively make Kansas the first in the country to stand up a digital infrastructure for military reciprocity and centralized licensing for professionals here in Kansas. A little bit about ASPIRE. We're a coalition of defense and military spouse organizations, elected officials, and the private sector. And those organizations include Blue Star Families, AUSA, which is the Association of the U.S. Army, the National Military Spouse Network, Women Veterans Interactive Foundation, and the Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation. This coalition facilitates state support for military spouses, veterans, and National Guard and Reserve Service members with interoperable digital credentials and creating employment efficiencies, speeding the hiring process, and propelling economic competitiveness. 16 states have passed laws similar to House Bill 2066 that passed in 2021 here in Kansas, though no state has actually succeeded in accomplishing true reciprocity or operationalized such laws due to the complexity of licensing and credentialing systems across the country. An additional barrier here in Kansas is that many states have actually already addressed is our decentralized licensing system. Here in Kansas, all of our licensing bodies are independent of one another. When a military service member is given a permanent change of station order, that recertification process remains unwieldy for families and leads to unnecessary loss of household income and adverse impacts on state economies. House Bill 2388 would directly support military spouse employment opportunities through a digital infrastructure for license and credential reciprocity. Additionally, Kansas's licensing system would be brought into the 21st century with a centralized electronic credential data management system with instantaneous credential verification and an auditable record, all of which doesn't currently exist here in the state. Dr. Arthur Laffer's research firm, Laffer Associates, you may remember him as Reagan's economist, conducted an economic impact assessment of labor market efficiency, specifically on the economic benefits that can be realized by drastically shortening the length of time it takes to start a new job, either by unemployment or relocation. The 42-day problem is what that is called. This is an issue that disproportionately impacts military spouses who are more likely to require an occupational license to work and more frequently move across state lines. While Kansas has good policy in place to expedite licensure for military spouses, there is no operating system to enable boards and commissions to meet the challenge. Even in today's low unemployment environment, this still represents a $540 million problem for the state of Kansas. According to a research study by Embold Research, more than 1 in 5 Americans works in an industry that requires state-issued occupational license. And for military spouses, it is 1 in 3. The annual percentage of military spouse population that moves across state lines is 14.5%, compared to just 1.1% for civilian spouses. Lastly, 1 in 5 credentialed military spouses faces challenges maintaining their licenses. This has a detrimental effect on military spouses who are 30% more likely than civilians to have a state license in the first place, contributing to the fact that 35% of military spouses are underemployed already. The Aspire Coalition stands in support of House Bill 2388 and thanks the committee for their work on this bill. We have many active duty veterans and other experts currently working on this issue in other states across the country, and we urge you to reach out with any questions. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Thanks, Colton. Any questions for Colton? Representative Burkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would the state have to build this site then, or this platform?
Yes, so this platform actually already exists. What this would be doing, and this language specifically enables the use of all of the licensing and boards and commissions that are licensing entities in the state to effectively continue all of their workflows the way they are, but feed into one central system that already is built.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, thanks.
Thank you.
Seeing no other proponents, there are no opponents in person. There is a neutral in person. Carol Moreland, are you here? Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, Carol Moreland, the administrator for the Kansas Board of Nursing. And thank you for allowing me to come today. The Board of Nursing is pretty neutral on this, although we do have some concerns that I think you need to be aware of. I'm just going to do an overview because I feel like my testimony that I submitted really goes into great detail. And so I'm not going to go into that much detail. Two things that this requires: that we have a verified electronic credentials in addition to paper-based credentials, and that the licensing bodies would be required to use a central electronic credential data management that can provide instantaneous credential verification, and mandates that each system maintain an auditable record. I just wanted to make you aware, you probably remember that Kansas joined the Nurse Licensure Compact in 2019. And in case you're not familiar with what that is, there's 39 states that are in this Nurse Licensure Compact. And basically it means that a nurse would get a multi-state license in their primary state of residence. And then they can practice in those 38 states. There's nothing that they have to do with that Board of Nursing. So it's not slowed down. So let me just tell you, if there's a nurse that got their multi-state from Arkansas and they come to Kansas, maybe their spouse is stationed in Kansas now or something, and they just want to come here and practice, there's nothing that they have to do with us, okay? They can just come in here. So I think it's pretty easy for nursing, as long as it's from those 39 states and they have a multi-state license. A lot of the other states in the nation actually are getting legislation in place to join the Nurse Licensure Compact. This has proved so helpful during the pandemic because it's one of the best ways to mobilize nurses from one area to the other. But I'm telling you this because one of the requirements to be in the Nurse Licensure Compact is we have to use a central coordinated licensure information system. It's a national nursing database. It has licensure, education, discipline in there from like 5 million nurses, all the nurses in the United States. Every state in the nation uses that. So it's very easy to use that for state-to-state verification if needed. It's very easy for the boards of nursing to use that because if there's a nurse license in another state and for some reason we need to see some of that information, we can go in Nurses and see it. The other good things about Nurses as a licensee, as a nurse, I have registered with a part of Nurses called e-Notify. I am notified if there's been anything done with my license. because there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of that out there right now. So if someone was trying to use my license and get another job or something, I would be notified about that. The other thing about nurses is the employers use this. Because being part of the Nurse Licensure Compact, if that employer wants to bring that nurse in who has that multi-state license in Arkansas, again, they don't do anything through us. So that employer just goes on that national database, pulls it up, and can see that that nurse has a active multi-state license from Arkansas. So it is extremely helpful. It is very, very good for patient protection. So the Board of Nursing just wants to make sure when it's talking about this centralized electronic verification system and stuff, that still allows us to use that national database. Because I think you're talking there about something at the state level. But if for some reason we have to leave that national nursing database, we will not be able to be in the compact anymore, which I will tell you would be very unpopular. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then the other thing about paper licenses and verifications. Paper licenses are very susceptible to several fraud risks that I just hope that you're aware of. One of them is counterfeiting. I will tell you, if you issue a paper license, it would be somewhat easy probably for someone to do a counterfeit of that license. Tampering, they can take that paper license and they can do some tampering and change some pieces of that. It's not always easy to see if you're looking at that. Lost or stolen, and then inaccurate information. I don't know that many of our nursing employers in the state of Kansas would go by a paper license, because they're used to going in and doing that electronic instant verification, not looking at a piece of paper. We have the ability for our licensees to print a paper license. However, it does not have the expiration date or the date that it was issued, okay? It would just have like the name of the nurse and like if they're RN, LPN, APRN, but it is truly, there's information on there about how they can go into our website and see the verification database. However, those are some concerns that we have. Most of the nursing licensure boards no longer do paper licensing for all of these issues. They have chosen to go to this electronic one. We stopped issuing printed license cards in July 1st of 2010 for these very reasons, and it did save us some money. We do actually mail to the licensee a wall certificate, once they graduate, they get licensed so that they do have something. And then we just wanted to talk just a couple of minutes about this centralized licensing system. I think the thing to remember when you're putting all licensure data into one licensing system in the state, something happens to that licensing system, you have just all of your licensing data, versus if you let the licensing boards kind of handle their own, as long as they have an effective one that can do verification, can do instantaneous, can do reports and stuff like that. If you have problems, you've only maybe lost the data from one licensing source, not everybody within the state. So data security, privacy cost, it's very expensive to do a consolidated, central licensing system. So just in summary, there's some parts of this that we support. We support the need for a licensing body to have an electronic, secure licensure verification system that's available 24/7 for licensees, employers, the public, the other boards of nursing, so it's easy for someone to go from state to state. We support that licensure bodies should utilize an electronic record system to issue, revoke, suspend, or maintain. We just don't feel that it has to be one that everybody has to use in the state. We do not support that we should have to use paper licensing. The way this is written is we have to do paper licenses in addition to the electronic credentialing. We really feel like that is going to set the licensing board up for fraud And fraud is out there right now. I will tell you that. So we just asked that maybe there could be a little bit more discussion about that, and maybe the paper thing would be an option if the licensing board did not have a good electronic system in which you have instantaneous verification. That's all we ask, and thank you for your time. I'll stand for any questions if anybody has any.
Committee, any questions? Representative Shue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this might not be a question for you, but I'll just put it out, and whoever can answer can. If this electronic system already exists, are we essentially kind of writing a bill that kind of shifts all of the chips into one basket rather than kind of a normal RFP system like we usually do? Is that what we're doing here? I'm just trying to get some more nuts and bolts answers on that.
I think there are more than one that exist, and that an RFP would be put out. We can't mess with the administration or the acquisition process.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because the previous conferee had just mentioned that, just a system already exists. So I just want to make sure there are multiple and that we can lay out our requirements and then put out for bid. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else on the list to testify. Is there anyone else who wants to testify on this bill? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on HB 2388. We have some time, so my intent is to try to kick out two different bills. The first one is the one on apprenticeships, and the second one is the fireworks bill. So first one is HB 2292. And I know there's going to be some amendments, but let's get a description of what the bill currently does. Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman. Members of the committee. The committee will recall this is a bill that sets up a tax credit for employers who employ apprentices in accordance with federal regulations. The apprenticeship agreement, apprenticeship plan has to be registered in accordance with federal law and also with any state applicable law. The Office of Registered Apprenticeship, would be administering this program. And that's, in a nutshell, what the bill does.
Any questions for the revisor? Any discussion or amendments on 2292? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment. Well, I don't. Charles, do you have an amendment? Oh, I guess not. Never mind. No, the one regarding the adult learners.
You want to attempt to explain the amendment?
I think I can probably do that. At the beginning of the year, we looked at the interim committee's results and saw the parent to teacher program outlined in that document. And then we had Western Governors University here yesterday describing exactly the same thing, which to my way of thinking is an apprenticeship program and fits very neatly into this package.
So it's the apprenticeship program that would allow pairs to be online and learn to be teachers and get a teacher certificate through the apprenticeship program while they're still working at schools, and no matter even if they're a rural area or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's see. I can't see. Okay. That's perfect. I said it fit neatly. I didn't say it fit easily. There's a little bit to it, I'll grant you. Oh, he left. Oh. It's like,
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So as Representative Sutton indicated, this would add sort of an educator registered apprenticeship grant program to the bill. Most of the changes, in fact, pretty much all of them, are in the Word document that is at the end of the PDF. And you'll see that there are two sections added. So the first section is definitions. You'll see there, applicant, we're referencing a school district in Kansas. Eligible related training instruction provider is an institution of higher education that provides a teacher prep program. State educational institution, a municipal university, any not-for-profit institution of post-secondary education in Kansas, and then also not-for-profit independent institutions, that private institutions outside of Kansas. Candidate refers to a paraeducator or other person employed by a school district. Apprentice is the standard definition, a person at least 16, except if an older age is otherwise required by law, is participating in a registered education apprenticeship program and is employed to learn an apprenticeable occupation as defined in 29 CFR 29.4. And I note that education has been defined to be an apprenticeable occupation. I'm sure the conferees are aware of this much more than myself, but I do know at least one state did go to the federal government and get an education apprenticeship program approved. And then just the definition of registered education apprenticeship program. So then Section 5 is actually the program itself. It just sets it up. The Commissioner of Education, the State Board of Education, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary's designee shall coordinate to develop the program. And then if you look at the next page there, the State Board of Education in coordination with the Secretary of Commerce is to adopt rules and regulations to implement and administer the program. And that includes grant application procedures, forms and deadlines, terms, conditions, and requirements for an award of an apprenticeship program grant. And these grants go to the educational institution that is providing the or rather the body that is providing the training. The school districts, the definition of applicant. So other things that, other regulations that they need to develop include partnering with the eligible related training instruction provider, identifying projected candidates for the apprenticeship in the manner designated by the state board. Grant funds are to be used for payment of apprenticeship apprentice tuition and fees up to a maximum of $2,750 per year for 4 years. So that's the money that we're talking about here. And also payment of apprentice wages, prioritization for grant applications, and a method to award grants equitably across the state. And then the last part of that section is just a requirement for an evaluation of the program and to prepare reports to both the Commerce committees and also the education committees.
All right, Charles. So the reason they are grants and not tax credits is because school districts don't pay tax, and that's the only way to get them the money. Is that right?
Yes, that would be correct. And I neglected to mention that there is also a limit. There's a fund set up. Of course, it's subject to appropriations, but what the language here says is $3 million each year, each fiscal year.
All right. Any questions on the amendment to either the reviser or the bringer of the amendment? Representative Shue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I think I like this, and broadly I support kind of the parent to teacher idea, I think this is just a really big policy addition without a full hearing that makes me uncomfortable voting for it in this manner. I would totally support a full hearing and then vetting this further, but as it stands, I don't think that I can support it kind of in this manner.
Any other discussion or questions? Representative Clayton.
Thank you. Okay, so committee, if we look on, at the bottom of, so section 5 of the amendment. So here's my issue is that, again, I like the idea of this, but it also involves us making decisions. It's almost kind of a mandate of here, we're going to make this whole new program and put folks who have not had the opportunity to tell us about their ideas of implementation. So we've got the Commissioner of Education who isn't here, anyone from the state board. I guess we do have someone from Commerce, right? But so I'm worried about the amount, the potential cost, the amount of time. I like the idea. I would love to have it, introduce it in an exempt committee and kick it over here and let's have a hearing and give it the fair hearing it deserves. But I want to make sure that we're doing this right, although, right on, a good idea. But I would prefer just more information since we'd be putting this on a fair amount of different organizations. So thank you.
Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo my colleagues' sentiments, and I'm it's a lot to read in 5 seconds here. But on what I think is the second to last page, that prioritization for grant applications from applicants partnering with eligible related training instruction providers that permit the apprentice to continue their current employment by utilizing flexible training models such as online delivery, competency-based education, and courses offered on nights or weekends. So what we're saying is we're going to pay apprentices to have demonstration learning experiences with weekend delivery, with online delivery. I guess that, so we're not talking about paying for student teaching. I think it's a lot to try to digest here, and that prioritization just pops out first.
So the grant is meant to go to the school district to pay for the class instruction or help pay for it as an apprenticeship program. And the program should be flexible enough to allow them to stay at work is what it says. The money does not go directly to the individual.
So this doesn't pay the apprentices?
No.
Okay. It's a lot to follow in a very short period of time. I would agree with my colleagues. I'd like to see it with its own hearing and the stakeholders involved. Thank you.
Representative Christy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just discussing with my colleague that in Garden City, they're working on an apprenticeship program, but I think it's under development. I would definitely like to connect the maker of the motion to the superintendent and attorney that are working on it. I think it's of critical need. I think that the legislature would be very supportive. If we could get it blessed, that'd be great. I know we can fix things later too, but I agree. I'd be a little more comfortable if we had that conversation with them, and I would be happy to make those connections with the representative that made the most excellent motion.
Any further discussion? Representative Clayton.
I guess if nothing else, it would be us kind of doing our chair, our vice chair, and our ranking a little bit dirty to put something this complicated on. It'd be a heck of a bill brief to have to write, and neither of them are here. So, you know.
I think they're both familiar with the bill and the amendment. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Representative Sutton, do you want to move your amendment?
I would absolutely like to move my most excellent motion.
All right. Can I get a second on it? Representative Burkamp. Any further discussion? For those of you that were on the Workforce Development Committee, there were one of the issues is teachers, and WGU did come and go through their version of the Parent to Teachers program, and it was a pretty incredible program, which is why I thought it might be a good fit in this bill. And with that, I'll let you close, Representative Sutton.
I close.
So, committee, you've heard the amendment. All in favor, say aye. All against, say no.
No.
Noes appear to have it. Good try, sir. Are there any other amendments or discussion on this bill? We have an amendment from the Department of Commerce that I'd like to hand out. And this had to do with what Shonda was talking about as far as making a change in the definitions to allow, I'm going to have Charles explain it.
Thank you, sir.
Secret probation.
Yeah. It has to do with probationary periods, if you guys recall. Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, this bill, this amendment, if you just turn to page 2, as the committee will recall, there were 2 tax credits as part of this bill. And for the first one of the requirements was that the registered apprentice be employed for at least 7 consecutive months during the calendar year preceding the year for which the credit is claimed. You see that language is stricken, and instead we would insert the probationary period as defined for that apprenticeship in the Registered Apprenticeship Program Standards, Appendix A of the work process schedule, or as designated by the Secretary in the taxable year for which the credit is claimed. So the requirement then, just what the amendment does is instead of 7 consecutive months, the requirement is that the apprentice be employed for the probationary period.
Any question on how this works? Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I look to Charles, just to make sure, does this affect the multi-employers during the probationary period? How does that play into it?
I'm sorry, what type of employers?
So if there are multiple employers during the probationary period, how would that affect what's going on here? We heard some testimony, as I recall, that some apprentices come through multiple employers, and rather than a consecutive period of time, they're on again, off again. So does this take care of that situation?
No, I think that the way this is currently written is that it would be, if you look at lines 19, starting at line 19 there, it's a credit against income tax liability imposed upon an eligible employer that employs an apprentice, and then for at least the probationary period. So it would probably not, as currently written, allow for multiple employers for periods that would add up to the probationary period.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what is the probationary period defined anywhere?
So the way the amendment reads is as defined for that apprenticeship. I think the probationary periods vary in the registered apprenticeship program standards. And as you will recall, one of the things that has to happen is the apprentice has to be part of a registered program. So, and that's, I think, defined by federal law and also possibly by state law. And so there's just a reference there to a work process schedule or as designated by the secretary. But the concept is that it would be in compliance with the federal requirements.
So it would vary by program?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea how long? Is it less? Are they less than 7 months, or are they?
I don't know how much they vary by program, but I believe that they are more than 7 consecutive months.
Okay, very good. I would hope so.
All right, so Charles, I want to say that this amendment was indeed to affect an individual that might be, say, working for a union that would move from one company to the next. They wouldn't be working for that particular company for 7 months, but as long as they were in their probationary period and contracted with the union, according to the secretary, that it would allow them to be eligible. And I know the Department of Commerce is here, so they might want to speak to the amendment. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I know this was important to you guys. So
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. You're exactly right. It will take care of that multi-employer issue that we spoke about in our testimony originally. The probationary period does depend on the particular industry that they're in, so you will see some variation there, but it meets all of the safety standard requirements and all the federal guidelines related to apprenticeships.
okay, thank you. And I'll go ahead and when I move this amendment, allow Charles to make any necessary changes to affect that properly if it's not written correctly or needs to be changed. Any other questions on this amendment? Seconded by Representative Penn. I'll go ahead and move the amendment. You've heard the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. All against say no. Motion passes. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment. So this is one, Charles, this is the one regarding long-term health care facilities. Thank you.
Committee, stand by. If you're referring to the hospital amendment, they were back and forth. They had two different versions. And so we're up against the deadline. So what we'll do is we'll okay. All right. I would imagine would be the most recent one, but if we want to, I think we're close to completing this bill. We'll just pass out the most recent one, and I'll make that motion if we need to. Okay. There you go. Yeah, so committee, the intent here, as you know, the hospitals asked for, or the long-term healthcare facilities and medical professionals were asking for, I think, $15,000 a hospital, and rather than do, and they also wanted them to be grants, and so rather than do all of that, we're adding the word grant to the bill because a lot of them are nonprofits and don't pay taxes, similar to the school bill or the Parity Teachers program that we were handing out earlier. So it makes a change to the bill to allow them to be grants in the case that any firm, not just healthcare, is a nonprofit that wants to participate in an apprenticeship program. They would become grants rather than tax credits. And it forms a new, or causes the department to form a new apprenticeship program for healthcare, and they would participate just like any other company. And so my guess would be most of the hospitals would have enough of these apprenticeships that they would exceed their $15,000 in a year anyway. So that's kind of what we had settled on. Right. So, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm looking at this. This is a lot to read in a minute. You know, I'm not sure. Wow.
Any Representative Burkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at subsection F on section 4, if the grant amount isn't used, it just rolls forward, is there any concern that maybe that amount gets to be significant down the road, or do we expect that full amount to be used over the course of the year? So if it gets like $10 or $20 million at some point, it looks like it's just going to keep rolling forward.
All right, so it changes it basically takes the $7,500,000 limit and adds $2.5 million to it. Not necessarily for the hospital. It increases the limit of the bill to $10 million instead of $7.5 million because of the addition of all these other grants for nonprofits and for hospitals.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on the amendment? Representative Neighbor has seconded the amendment. I apologize. So, Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. So where would this grant money come from? Did I miss that?
It comes from the account that would have $10 million in it. And the department, same exact account. We just made the account a little larger to account for the additional.
Where they can apply for. Okay, thank you.
So, seeing no further discussion on that, I'll go ahead and move the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say no. Chairs in question. Now, the motion passes. Any further discussion on the bill? Any more amendments? Can I get a motion to pass the bill favorably as amended? Representative Neighbor?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass House Bill 2292 as amended favorably for passage.
Seconded by Representative Dodson. With discretion to the reviser?
With
Yes.
the discretion to the reviser for any technical changes.
Is that okay with second? It is. Committee, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say no. No. Bill passes. We'll have to save the fireworks for another day. I'll see you Monday at 1:30, and we are adjourned.